Thanks everybody for attendance. It's 5 o'clock. I've got one member of the public here, the press, so I'll go through the evacuation process. A fire drill is not expected, so if the alarm sounds, please evacuate the building quickly and calmly. Please use the stairs and do not use the lifts. Once outside the building, please gather opposite the Yorkshire Bank on the opposite side of the road. Exit by the door which you entered the room or by the fire exits which are clearly indicated by the standard green fire exit signs. If you require any assistance to evacuate the building, please make yourself known to a member of the staff. Also, please make sure your mobile phones are turned off or set to silent, although on this occasion as Councillor Tanya has asked me to if she can keep her phone on. Something might happen or might not happen. And I advise everybody that the meeting will be recorded for future broadcast. Okay. Item number 2, apologies. We'll receive one apology from Councillor Wilson and Councillor Lewin Nash is substituted. Right, item number 3. Item number 3 is can I sign the minutes? There's you probably want everybody who's got a copy of the minutes will perhaps notice that the deliberate mistake of this month was instead of Tuesday 10th of January, it's actually Thursday 10th of January. So the amended minutes I have in front of me, can I sign them as a true record? Item number 4, declarations of interest. Members to declare any interest not on the approved schedule. Councillor Longton.
Chair, I've got to take off member of Warwickshire Police and Crime Panel. I've been meaning to do it for ages.
Councillor Tandy.
I need to put on Warwickshire Police and Crime Panel. That's very
Okay. Public consultation. We don't have any speakers in front of us, which is rather unusual. So, item 6, monitoring grounds maintenance contract. Paul, you take it.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. Hopefully, members have read through what is a quite brief report. I wasn't intended to go through it line by line because, as I say, we've been through it. But just pick out one or two salient points. Last reported in July of 18, which was post the issues and problems that we had in the spring and early summer of last year. So this looks at grounds maintenance operations post that day, not pre that day. Majority of the summer was taken up with extremely hot weather, as members will know. Grass, which was one of the main banes of contention, did, to all intents and purposes, stop growing for 6 to 12 weeks, as people know. Their grass was dead in most gardens. That did give us an opportunity to redeploy staff, not my staff, redeploy the staff of Glendale to other areas, as it indicates that shrub bed growth was particularly still bad. And they were redeployed into that kind of area. And we did have a really bad problem throughout the summer of last year with summer bedding displays dying. No matter how much water we put on them, bowser after bowser, the plants still struggled, which was a problem, particularly in outlying areas. The autumn-winter period has been, again, mild. I'm only stating the obvious, but this has allowed grass cutting to start in January, which is the earliest I've ever known grass cutters in the whole time, in 30 years, it's the earliest I've ever known machines out. They've been cutting since January of earlier this year, which has been a benefit given that they're on the second cycle in some places now, and the grass has just started to move. So we will see how Glendale operates over the next month or so when the growing conditions really start to take effect. The autumn winter series do a lot of shrub maintenance, and there's been a lot of reduction pruning throughout the borough, and we've also taken out beds in areas where they've been problematical, which has been identified by members and also members of the public. We also undertook the full gambit of cut and collect, and that was done and achieved on time, which has been the first time we've been able to do that for a number of years because the weather conditions were with us this year. Footway and weed spraying has also commenced early, and they're on to their second cycle, and it has been effective. You can, as I walk around the streets, you can see it has been effective in places where it actually started to take now. Again, the benefits of that will only be seen when it really starts to kick off. But they're also using a new chemical to them, which has got a slight residual impact. They've only just started to apply it this week. It's called Shakira. Got a slight, as I said, residual effect. They're putting it onto their shrub beds. So hopefully that'll have a benefit to the shrub beds going forward as well. The winter's seen a number of sites across the borough have footway and road-based resurfacing. That still is ongoing. We'd hope to have finished the majority of that by the end of next week, which is the end of the financial year. But some of this may move on into next year. We've also seen the normal bin and bench replacements and looking after the assets during the winter period. Glendale Live is now fully rolled out to all staff. Brass, last year it was majoritively brass maintenance that was on their system. Now it has everything: shrub bed maintenance, litter picking, annual bed maintenance, everything that should form part of their contract. So we should have a real idea of where they are at any one particular time. And the benefits of that can only be that we'll be able to tell members, inform members of the public when they're going to be on a certain location. It's not going to be available to members of the public, but the new contract going forward, and as members have been informed, this form of live access will be available as part of that contract. Moving into customer satisfaction, as has been stated there, customer satisfaction cards have been changed. They've been started to go out since the beginning of February, and on it clearly states that if it's not returned, we take that as a point of satisfaction, as agreed by this OSP several months ago, over a year ago now. February has seen a number of returns, and it has promoted a number of returns. I haven't collated those yet, but February is promoting a number of returns, and also Marches, and we will report what those what those are. And if members wish to know what that kind of information is, I'm willing to give that to members if they would like to see what that is in advance of the next meeting, of course. Performance monitoring, it runs to, I can only take it to December but January, when I wrote this report, because as members will be aware, I've been doing other work, so I've done this report early, but I have January's as well, and it's running at a very similar basis. It's about 90% and 72% on informal. So within the parameters set by our performance indicators. Rectifications, excuse me. Rectifications are as identified there from August through to January. They are. I've looked back through the last 3 or 4 years, and they are broadly in line. I don't know if that's a positive or a negative, because we should be aiming for no rectifications. So, but it is broadly in line with the number of rectifications you have issued in previous years. But you would expect from August to January be less rectifications issued, because the majority of it is based on weed and grass growth. So going forward from this point on, We will see how the contractor performs now. They've got systems in place. They've had the kick up the pants that they were given last year by OSP, and have got the staffing and machinery in place to deliver the contract which they are being paid for. Chair.
Any members of the panel wish to say anything about Paul's report? Councillor Wandsworth.
Thank you, Chair. I know we said obviously that this report follows the it's post the summer period where we had the issues, although it takes from just the end of the summer into early autumn, doesn't it, really, I'd say. Have we actually learned the lessons from last summer, do you think? Are we sure? Because obviously this is where I'd expect to see those come in now, given that it was that sort of previous reporting period where we had the issues. And are we able to say that we've learned from those now?
Chair, if I may, the simple answer is yes, but with a caveat. There's always a caveat. They tell you one thing, but what the proof of the pudding is in the eating. But with machine, dissect it into two salient parts really. They had a problem last year with staffing and a problem with machinery. With their staffing, they've had a recruitment drive on since January. They've had, members may have seen it, they have a big sign up on the front of their building which says recruiting now. That has actually been successful. They have recruited a number of staff, upwards of 10 earlier than they have in previous years. They've started earlier than previous years. They're actually onto their second cycle on housing sites as well as on verge cutting. They've started with shorebed maintenance, which they haven't done as early as this again in previous years. But to back that, so they've got the staffing, but to back that up, they've lost, I shouldn't say that, a contract in Liverpool ceased, and as a consequence of that, they had all the machinery from the Liverpool contract has been sent to here. That's 7 verge mowers, numerous other bits of kit, so they've not only got newer kit, they've also got backup machinery if machinery was to come off the road. I'm not doing the day-to-day management of that. David Truster is now, but I met with them earlier this week to ensure that, to know where, to ensure I could say to you tell you where they are in their in their cycle. So I would hope, to answer your question, I would hope that they are in a much better position now to react to when the weather changes, because the weather will change. There's no doubt it will change, and possibly this weekend, and we will see a grass spurt, and it's whether they can keep on top of that grass spurt, because that is the major, and that is how we judge primarily. So hopefully that answers your question.
Thank you, Chair.
Any Councillor Panda?
I just want to find out, because I'm new to this one, the Glendale Live is not fully, so how it works now, so can you explain a bit more?
Glendale Live is a mobile device. All operatives are handed a mobile, it's like a mobile phone in effect. All their tasks are dialed in, they are listed on their mobile. When they go to the site, they know exactly what they've got to do on the site. They tick it, or when they've completed it, and also take a photograph to determine where, and it's dated as well. So there's not this opportunity to, because everybody says you could gerrymander information. I'm saying you can or you can't. You could, but it's date stamped so that there's proof that they left that site on that particular day, and it was to that particular standard, be it of the right standard, the wrong standard. It is a standard. So that then is back fed into a system every day. They dock it in, or it's synced through whatever when they get to a Wi-Fi. And on a management basis, we can see a page which shows where they are. It's green that they're managing to undertake all their work to the sufficient times, the right frequency, should I say, the right quality. Amber is obviously a warning. Red is that they're behind. It's a simple red, orange, green, and we are able to see that. See where they're at any one time, and if members ask, we can tell members they've been on this date, this date, this date, this date, this date, or not on this date, this date, this date, this date. So, and going forward, any contractor post-November will have to provide a system that not only is available to us, it was also available to the general public to see where they are at any particular time, and that will also be via our website, and a website the contractor will operate as well. So this is not a prerequisite of this contract. These have brought this in because it's a system they operate elsewhere, and other contractors use it elsewhere as well, and it does. It's really what should have been required, but it's developed over the period of time that this contract's been alive. I hope that.
And another one is during the period of 2 defaults were issued with the penalty of 1,200. Can you explain what reports were issued and what?
I can't, councillor, because I haven't got that information with me, but I will send you that detail if all members would like that detail. I'll send it out to all members. Thank you, and I do apologise.
Councillor Elliott.
Thanks. Bottom of page 15, 2 defaults were issued. Is that a penalty of 600 per default?
It is.
That's what I wanted to check. Thanks.
Any other members of the panel? Okay, thanks for that, Paul, and I think that should put us in good stead for the new contract.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay.
Can Paul be released, Chair?
You know. I never knew we could actually tie them down, no? All right.
I might stay. What do you mean you might stay?
Just sit through me first, Paul.
Right, item number 7, updating the work of the Nuneaton Museum and Art Gallery, including involvement in GH2. Kathleen, will you take this, please?
Thank you, and thank you everybody. Like Paul, I don't propose to go through this and read the report out, because I don't think that would be a very good use of time. To give some context, this report is slightly different from what I've brought to the Overview and Scrutiny Committee before, and hopefully it's a bit fuller in detail about actually what we spent our time doing last year. That's reflective of the fact that a new forward plan was agreed for the museum in February last year, so the kind of larger strategic and direction was dealt with in that. And the content has also been slightly influenced by the destination assessment that was done for the borough in 2016. That said, or highlighted the museum as part of an important part of the visitor economy for the borough, and probably the first time really talked about as not being a sense of civic pride, social cohesion, an opportunity providing learning opportunities, but also highlighted the role that we have in the economic development of the town, and that's why I've provided some alternative information within my report about aspects of that we're starting to explore in terms of giving baseline data. So just to pick up on a couple of things, as I brought some kind of visual stuff along with me. There was one addition in our community involvement. We also did a project with Bedworth Cricket Club. You'll all be aware of the fantastic new facilities that they have over there. And we worked with the committee members to produce some panels around the history of the cricket club and of their players. And I only realised today that that was a project that had been on the report, so apologies for that. Also subsequent to that, I've talked about, get the right page, in our learning, the new session, the timeline activity session that was to be delivered at the museum. I've put copies of the material that publicised that on the board behind you in time travelers. You'll see it's got quite a strong design, and it reflects the kind of very new approach that we've taken to that schools project. We're offering a very immersive experience for those children, and there is an image in the report of the children all dressed up and experiencing that project. The feedback from Martin Yo, who was the teacher who led the children during that pilot was very, very positive, and we're hoping that that will provide a very new and beneficial service to local schools. One of the other things that I have tried to stress within the report is the use of our collections. I know from speaking to visitors, to lecture members, to officers, and that quite often assumption can be made that just because an object is in store it never sees the light of day. I hope that I tried to show you in this report just how many ways those collections can be used to public benefit. And then there was just a couple of additional things that came in after this report was completed. One was we received news yesterday of a grant of just over £2,000 from West Midlands Museum Development officers. That money is to fund a project called Talking Objects. The aim will be to take objects out of the community and use them with both dementia, people with dementia and people who are pre-dementia, perhaps exhibiting or experiencing social isolation. And that money will really allow us to get a pilot off the ground and hopefully again use our collections to have a positive impact on the community. The second thing, and linked slightly to the Elliott Bicentenary, is the museum will be hosting the BBC and artist Gillian Waring on Monday, who will be filming for her documentary for the BBC, which will be shown later this year. They'll be making use of our displays and indeed a couple of members of staff in that filming, hopefully to the benefit of the museum and the borough when it goes out on broadcast. So I think those are the only few additions I've got, Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any members of the panel? Councillor?
Thank you, Chair. An interesting piece of information which was quite unexpected to me is that more than half the people who come to the museum, that's the reason why they've come to Nuneaton, or at least it's their main reason.
Yeah.
How do these visitors and perhaps other potential visitors, do you think, get to know about the museum itself and what's going on there?
When we look at things like our comments forms and things like that, word of mouth is always a significant factor. And I was actually at a tourism meeting yesterday, and other people were reporting that. Our leaflets are still very, very productive in bringing visitors to us. And we obviously do Facebook and things like that, and we notice that mums will be sharing things on Facebook when we're doing kids' activities, so we know that there's that kind of dialogue going on. Over and above things like the museums, the Nuneaton and Bedworth Borough Council's websites, we also populate things like Culture 24, Raring to Go, some of the other Warwickshire websites, Mumsnet and all of those things. So we quite often get responses that people have found on the internet but they can't remember where and what that was. And then there's more specific things like the Victoria costume exhibition last year, which brings in people from kind of farther afield, where we will actually actively go and go onto fan sites and tell fans that we're going to have that product there. I also shouldn't underestimate that many of the local artists or artists from further afield who have exhibitions with us also carry out their own marketing campaigns. Right. So they often quite often have artist mailing lists and that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. So there's quite a raft of things. I think I've said in my report, and I also said it in the forward plan, marketing is something we struggle with. It takes a lot of time, if not resources, to do it. And I wouldn't hand on heart say we were getting it right all the while. We're just about to commission some postcode data to get some more accurate readings on exactly where people are coming from. We're starting to work towards doing Instagram this year, which is a bit later than we wanted to. I think it's just keeping an eye and keeping asking people the question about how they found out about us.
And do you feel that from your contacts with visitors from outside of the borough, that the visitors are coming from sort of the Coventry area or from further afield?
We already know from sort of rough postcode data that the A5 corridor, that parts of Leicestershire, Coventry certainly, and we get anecdotally the evidence that we're better than the Herberts, which is quite nice to hear, considering how big an institution they are. We also have people from Tamworth, Birmingham, those parts of, so the surrounding area as well to a degree. Sort of goes out in rings, and then you've got those people who are here for business or visits and things. So we can show visitors from London, Manchester, Birmingham. And we also know that for some exhibitions and things, people will travel considerable distances to come and see something that's really of interest to them. I think the postcode data, when we look at it, it could alter according to what exhibition and what we've got on at the time. School holidays, July, August, we're going to see a high percentage of people coming from further afield. And then perhaps in December, January, it is a very much maybe more local audience. So.
Thank you very much, Catherine. Thanks, Chair.
Councillor Longan.
Thank you, Catherine. You didn't mention it, but I will.
The Collycroft?
No, the museum has got the full accreditation last year.
Yeah.
And I think we should be singing those praises because it's work. It doesn't, these things don't come off the shelf. People have to do a lot of hard work to get them. And the value of it is recorded there because you've got accreditation and you get access to funding, which is very, very important. I mean, I rate it very highly. I love the place. More importantly, probably, my granddaughter loves it. She always wants to go to that place where you do things, as she puts it. So, I think we should recognise it that you have got that full accreditation. I notice it's not until 2022 now, or prior to if things change. So, I would like to put on record anyway, Chair, that we do recognise the fact that we've got this full accreditation for the museum services and say well done to them.
Councillor Hancock.
Yeah, thanks. I would support what Councillor Longden's just said. The museum across the way there is a real gem of the borough, and it was interesting to hear Catherine do that comparison with the Herbert, and I've been long associated with that museum myself, and I have to say I'm disappointed in it now. They've made many changes, and maybe it's me being old-fashioned, but I don't think they're all for the better. There's some hands-on stuff for the kids and that, but I don't actually think it compares to this museum. It's also interesting about the pulling power of it for bringing people into the borough, and I suspect that there's probably more people from outside of the borough come and visit it than from in the borough. She's shaking her head. But there's quite a few from outside of the borough. But something I'm particularly keen on, I've been for many years, and people will know I've said it on many occasions, is I think we could actually improve some of our outreach work, because people do have to travel here and go into the park to it. Yet we've got facilities both in Bedworth and Bulkington, for example, where we could do more outreach work. And I mean, it's a bit of an example on it. I think you probably got me mixed up with Barry with the Collycroft thing.
Yeah, right.
But Old Collycroft Residents Association, you know, we helped them get together, and they managed to get together various objects and historical stuff about the area, and they've been a very proactive association since we helped them set up. I'm very proud of that particular area. But it seemed a bit odd that you've got to have something in the museum down here rather than in Bedworth, and I think it could have been both, because I'm sure people down here would be interested as well about that aspect of Old Collycroft. But I think we could do more work locally, and I don't just mean individual groups. I think displays and exhibitions and things. So there's that thing. I'm really pleased to hear that there's some funding going to be able to help with the dementia groups, because I guess there's a few of us in here that's become dementia friends through the training and stuff, and they're a really good group of people to engage with, whether it be the persons that have actually got dementia or whether it's their carers or family. So that's really good. There's also the positive things about specific groups that put exhibitions on. I think one of the one of the interesting exhibitions that's been on is the photography people. You know, really outstanding stuff. There's a lot of talent in the borough that, again, as Councillor Longdon says, we don't shout out long and loud enough about. And just finally, Chair, and it's only a personal thing, I would love us to be able to, we could, attract something like the Knife Angel that's currently outside the cathedral in Coventry. I took my 2 grandchildren there on Saturday to see it. They're aged 8 and 7, I think. I'm not very good as a granddad with ages. But, you know, the message that, you know, they wanted to know about it, they were fascinated by it. And, you know, to learn there's 100,000 knives and weapons, you know, gone to making it. But the reason why those knives were collected and now displayed as it's a fantastic piece of art, but with a really strong message that you can give to people. And I'd love to be able to get that on the corner by the almshouses in Bedworth once it left there, and then move it down to Nuneaton. I don't know the practicalities of that. It may be that it's already on a national thing, but things like that would be fantastic in the borough, Chair. Thank you.
Anybody else? Right, I'll put my pennies worth in as well. As you can see in Appendix A, the amount of work that is intended to go for the museum. You know, this is a living museum. It's not a dark and dreary place. You know, it's very active and very positive things come from the museum. In fact, probably, or perhaps not so much, is that on Saturday the 18th of May, they're going to have a reminiscence thing about the Warwickshire Miners Association, which I've been in contact with Catherine and her colleagues, and I shall be playing a little bit of part in that, I would imagine. I still think I'm the last Warwickshire Miners Association president. And so, has anybody seen the mining exhibition that we have got at the museum? I think these stories that people will tell about the association itself, about various aspects of it, not just how they were working in the pits, about convalescent homes and various other things that the Mine Workers Association, Warwickshire Mine Workers Association carried out through the years. So I shall be taking part of that, and it all started with trying to find out where the Warwickshire banner had gone. And lo and behold, it was found in the Nuneaton Museum after some good work of tracking it down. So I'm going to find Catherine and her staff for that. So it just shows you that the museum is active, and it will be more active, because the 200 years bicentenary of John Elliott is remarkable in itself. And we can just get a little bit, as far as I'm concerned, about the mining industry in Warwickshire and the particular Mine Workers Association I was involved with. And that's all part of it. I think that's a good thing, and I would like to thank Catherine for the report that's in front of us today. Oh.
Sorry, Chair, I would normally have come forward, but actually I've just been reflecting on what Councillor Hancock says and what we can do as a panel. And I think there's probably universal support trying to see if we can get, you know, the Knife Angel across, and I wonder whether actually to that extent, Chair, I move that we ask the portfolio holder to work with the museum to investigate the possibility. If that finds a seconder.
I don't think that's going to present a problem. But maybe there's a problem getting across here, but the recommendation I can't see being particularly worrisome. So we shall ask the portfolio holder if he could use his whatever influence he's got in order to try and get the Knife Angel, because we see that the angel behind us is absolutely magnificent, you know, and that's from the museum, and that's out in, is it still out in London just now?
Yeah, I should have drawn attention to that. That's a quarter size of the banner, a copy of the banner that went to the processions event in London last year, that was made by or designed by local ladies working with an artist. The original is on tour across Britain. It's with the British History Museum in Manchester. It's recently been at a festival in South West, and it will continue touring, I think, for about another 6 months. So yeah.
So he's putting some good work within the borough. So we'll take that on board, that's the portfolio to see what you can actually do, and hope that we can get that in the borough. And thank you, Catherine, for your report, your very positive report. Right. Item number 8. Civic Hall. Jim?
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. As Catherine, they are fairly substantial reports, so I hope that everybody has had the opportunity to look through them. I will just draw attention to the 4 appendices. One is the Business Improvement Plan update, which historically we presented in January, and I'd like to take the opportunity to thank the Chair. With moving it back until March, it gives us more of an opportunity for more diverse breakdown of information, demographic and sales processes. Appendix 2 is basically the Audience Development Plan update, which gives details of admissions, sales, ticketing profile, and also ticket sales by art form, which is something that we have to pay great attention to. And one thing I would also like to say at this point, Chair, is that the joint partnerships that have started to develop even stronger between the museum and the Civic Hall, especially in preparation for George Eliot and also 2021 and 2022 with the Commonwealth Games. The amount of work that's going on in partnership and out in the community is going to grow between the 2 venues. We also have, which has already been brought up by a couple of members, in terms of the postcode demographic, we're noticing a big change, and we're putting that down primarily to our different marketing approaches and our social media campaigns. There is a social media update contained within the report, as our new opportunity, which are our e-shop system, which we can do now that we've upgraded our box office system. And also to assist our marketing effort, we've been working on a virtual tour for the last 6 months with a Google-based company, and we're hoping to launch that with the portfolios agreement in April. That will give people an insight into the venue, the types of activities that are offered at the venue, the services, and also it will give people the opportunity to actually sit in various seats within the auditorium, and they can get a 360-degree view. The positive thing about the Civic Hall is, of course, there are no poor sight lines, and the virtual tour is something that's been requested by a number of agents, most of whom are London-based, and they don't get the opportunity to travel out into the districts. Appendix 4 is an update on hire charges, which, following the budget, will be going up approximately 4% from the 1st of April, and all our hirers have been notified of that effect. And then the pantomime ticket sales and percentage occupancy analysis, which is something that members of the panel have requested for the last 4 years, is attached to Appendix 4. If I could draw members of the panel's attention to a couple of deliberate mistakes within the report. On page 37, in terms of projected outturn, having had a discussion with our accountant today, the anticipated underspend against operational budget will be in the region of 7,000 to 9,000. I know that management team did express some concerns a few weeks ago in terms of the fluctuations of the budget at the Civic Hall, but basically we operate not on a level playing field on a monthly basis. We have very, very busy seasons, then we have quiet seasons. And by working with our accountant, we're able to give a more accurate feedback now on a monthly basis. Also on page 40, we still have 5 shows to go in terms of the estimated percentage occupancy rate. But we are anticipating on sales forecast to date that private hires will achieve somewhere between 55 and 60% occupancy. And of those, we had 79 private hires this year, some 1 day, some 2 day and some 3 day events. That compares favourably with the Civic Hall's target of 65% occupancy, and in 18-19 we managed to achieve 64%. That's across the number of council promoted shows. I'd also like to draw members' attention to page 42. As you'll be aware, Travel Finesse relocated when the Co-op building closed down in Bedworth, and I'm very pleased to say that they've now been able to secure a permanent unit in Bedworth. And the other positive news with Travel Finesse moving out, from our perspective, is that a 3-year agreement has been drawn up with Bedworth Shop Mobility, and they will be taking up their lease on a 3-year basis every Tuesday to Thursday, 8:30 to 4:30 p.m, so maintaining a shop mobility presence within Bedworth. Also, our gallery space has now become available, and I'm very pleased to say that we've already had a booking in for Bedworth Rotary Club for their photographic competition, which runs with the local schools. Nicholas Chamberlain School will also be showing their GCSE art portfolio. That's probably going to be May time. And then, following discussions that Catherine and I had a couple of days ago now, the museum is also looking at extending. So in many respects, Councillor, that extends your question about can we do more in Bedworth. That is something that is actually programmed into the gallery space. We've also had news today as well of a 6-month renewed contract by Warwickshire County Council Adult Education. They rent the meeting rooms every Thursday and Friday for computer, literacy and arts-based workshops. So that's another positive. And in terms of the accreditation for the new revised coffee bar on page 45, it does actually state within the report that it was the February 2018 hygiene inspection. It was actually February 2019, and I have to take full responsibility for getting the year wrong. But we have achieved another 5-star rating for our food service and for food processing. Over and above that, Chair, I'd welcome any questions from the floor.
Any questions from the panel? Councillor Longdon.
I've got 1 or 2, Chair. Forgive me if I don't get the numbering right, but I can't even understand my own notes sometimes. The art strategy, which is contained in here somewhere, page 6, I think, somewhere. 36. Could you give us a bit more detail on what that's likely to entail and what you hope it will deliver?
Yep, through the Chair. Obviously, preparations for 2021 with the City of Culture's successful bid for Coventry. Catherine and I have been attending various meetings within the local area and also further afield. And it became abundantly clear to us that there was a need for us to develop an arts development strategy, basically to give everybody the opportunity of accessing the arts performance, but also spaces which can be used by artists, and also the linking in with local businesses and local artists. I don't want to steal Catherine's thunder because Catherine actually attended the meeting. But we had a briefing with Chris Laws from Economic Development, and there are a number of opportunities, in particular over the next 3 years, but we really do need to start developing them now. And hopefully, with the development of the arts development strategy, we're targeting that document to be completed by January, to work with arts providers within the borough and arts service providers in the borough, as well as venues, because there are a lot of underground arts-based activities that people simply don't know about. And it will give us the opportunity to identify them, publicise them, and hopefully then the link between Coventry and ourselves for 2021 will firmly put Nuneaton and Bedworth as a borough, but also the museum and the Civic Hall and the Nuneaton and Bedworth Arts Centres in particular firmly on the map.
It's not just down to performing arts.
It's not just down to performing arts, no.
Councillor Elliott.
Thanks, Chair. Just want to ask if you're continuing with the relaxed performances.
Yep, we certainly are, Councillor, and thank you very much indeed for being the driving force behind it a number of years ago. I believe it's in the statement on page, I can't read, I've got my glasses now, page 73. In 2017, the aforementioned councillor came to us with a proposal to stage a relaxed performance. The first one, we didn't have a great deal of time to publicise it. However, since that time, especially last year, occupancy went up to 376 seats, and we are programmed in again for the Sunday after opening night, and that's contained within the brochure. So if any of the groups that you're associated with council, you'd like to make them aware of it, then yes, it is becoming a regular feature. And we will also be, subject to a signer being available, we've had no confirmation yet, we will also be doing a signed performance as part of this year's programme.
Fantastic, thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Panda.
Thank you, Chair. In this appendix 2, the net income is going quite 190k to 57. It's quite really going every year down and down.
Yeah, that's a direct correlation, councillor, between the number of council promoted shows. We now only have 8 council promoted shows, and they've gone down over 70% over the period, and that's in line with the external audit review. And the specification that came forward was that we should be encouraging more private hires, so reducing the financial risk to the council. So the number of private hires has actually gone up, and the number of council promoted shows has reduced as a direct correlation.
And also number 47, total admissions again, 13,000 to 5,000 last year, now 3,600, now it's going every year down and down is again.
Yeah, again, councillor, that's based on the basis that 13,000 was achieved with 29 shows. We did actually only have 8 shows programmed within the 18-19 financial year. So that is, again, a direct correlation with the number of shows and the number of tickets that we would be able to sell.
No, I'm just worried about it, they're going down and down every year, so what will happen next few years? So,
in line with council budget policy, we are reducing the number of council promoted shows, so moving towards private hires, so reducing the risk to the council. So that's why the number of shows is a direct correlation to the number of tickets that we can sell.
Perhaps, Chair, it's worth just saying that that's not total occupancy for the Civic Hall, that's just occupancy for the
That number of shows.
council promoted shows. So there is a correlation elsewhere in the report which will show that occupancy elsewhere has gone up. So you're not comparing like to like. The expectation is that as we reduce the number of council promoted shows, the number of people coming into the centre for that particular activity will decline in, well, I suppose to be honest.
On a sliding scale.
Yeah.
If we could just draw your attention, councillor, to page 48, you'll see that with the number of private hires increasing, we are attending somewhere in the region of 25 to 27,000 admissions. In relation to private hires, the majority of private hirers now actually pay up front, so they take the tickets away with them. These are the ticket sales that we actually register through the box office. So that figure could be considerably higher than we would anticipate that it actually is. Because when we sell the tickets through the box office, the seating plan varies. In the What's On guide, you'll be able to see, I think it's on page 9, the general seating plan for the Civic Hall is 745 seats. For dance shows in particular, because people like to see the dancers' feet, we only tend to have rows A to D in. So that removes 68 seats before you start. But they are for private hire shows. Also, a lot of the dance schools use the floor as part of the performance space, so again reducing the number of seats on the floor. So even though you may anticipate that there's 745 seats available for every performance, that is not the case. And that's why we have to wait until the end of the financial year to work out what the achieved occupancy was. In terms of council promoted shows, that is an accurate figure, and because the last of the council promoted shows has now finished, and we achieved 64% occupancy across the 8 shows for the number of seats that were actually available.
So the overall income may be going up, you're saying, that one side down and one side up or something? Or?
Yeah, well, I'm pleased to say that for the occupancy for council promoted shows has actually gone up because we're now not taking risks. What we're now doing is we're actually targeting the programme for adult comedy, tribute and sport, and in particular sport. We've now moved to darts. And for those of you that attended the Bedworth Darts Masters last year, this year we've been able to get, in 2019-20, we've been able to get 3 of the country's top players. And as of today, every single seat and table in the VIP, gold and silver areas has now been sold out. The only seats we now have available are in the upper balcony, and that's nearly 10 months in advance. Thank you.
Councillor Mumsley.
Thank you, Judge. A couple of points I wanted to pick up, if you're happy for me to go through one. What I just wanted to check, page 45, it says a projected financial update will be provided at the meeting, specifically in relation to the bistro. I think the first figure you gave us was the upturn generally, wasn't it?
That's the overall.
The overall. So what is the figure that should be inserted into that?
Right. In relation to the report that I received from the accountant today,
Yeah.
because there was a change in staffing arrangements, where the original process was to staff the coffee bar strictly on not volunteers, pardon the expression, on casual staff. However, when we spoke to the environmental health team, we did actually have to have somebody who was responsible for all the paperwork, health and hygiene, for which we received a 5-star rating. So the actual income and expenditure over provisions bought and items sold, according to our accountant today, is that it is actually washing its face, it's breaking even. The only issue that we have got is that we are carrying the salary burden, which was actually put in after the budget was approved. And that was brought up at the last meeting.
But that budget only increase is only because the Civic Hall decided to increase the offering compared to what was approved in the budget unilaterally partway through. So that's why obviously we've got the additional nut cost, because originally it was just cakes and
That's correct.
sandwiches, but actually the Civic Hall decided to go to an enhanced offering beyond that, because that's what was written into the original budget. So given, I think my question is, given that the council shows we have, I think it was 8 this year, sorry, was it 8 this year?
Between £8,000 and £10,000 projection of
Yes,
expenditure.
Sorry, the
Eight
number of
council
council
promoted
shows.
Oh, 8 council promoted
It
shows,
was
yes.
8, wasn't it? Yeah. So if we've got 8 council promoted shows, and they're running at sort of 64% occupancy, what are we doing to drive those up? What are we doing to try and drive down the subsidy that we're currently council's giving to the Civic Hall to make it more on a commercial basis? Because it's £800,000 nearly, isn't it, that we each year?
No, it's around 600,000, I believe, councillor. 672,000 operational. And I must stress it is an operational budget.
Yeah.
And my understanding of a subsidy would be the fact that if we were going over budget and we needed additional income, then the council would be subsidising that service. We have an operational budget which is allocated at the beginning of the financial year, and as general manager it's my responsibility to come within that, or as we have done for the last 3 years, to come in under budget. In 16-17 we were 72,000 under, 17-18 15,000, and in 18-19 we're projecting an underspend of between 8 and 10,000. So what I would argue the case is, councillor, that it's not, in my mind, it's not a subsidy, it's actually an operational budget for me to be able to deliver a range of services. Okay, admittedly at the venue, and that does comprise of lettings, private hires, ticket sales, bar income, and also coffee bar operation as well.
If I can just add one thing, Chair, just to complete that picture, that in terms of the £672,000 operating budget, a sizable chunk of that, in excess of 200,000, is in fact effectively on-cost recharges from the town hall. So I charge into the Civic Hall, the accountants do, the lawyers do, health and safety officers do, etc. So the actual net operating budget is actually about £450,000 in reality. So if the Civic Hall didn't exist, a sizable chunk of that would just have to be distributed across other council services in any event, because you wouldn't be able to lose all of those recharges. Some of it will be due to building costs, repair and maintenance, etc. But the other aspects of it will actually be arms and legs of support services, etc., which are very difficult to lose without having a significant impact on other services.
I must disagree. I think the public would see it very much after sales of tickets, sales of food, sales of everything else that the Civic Hall does, that the council is still providing 672, nearly £700,000 a year. Whether that's recharge costs, even then it's 400, be £472,000 if we say there are £200,000 of recosts. Nearly £500,000 a year, and that's why I think the nub of my question still remains: is what are we trying to do to try and drive up the income we're getting, to try and offset some of that money that is being provided by the council to the Civic
Do you
Hall?
want me to answer that?
I'm quite happy to, if you want to have a...
Well, whilst Tim's thinking about an answer to that, one of the things, and it comes back to Councillor Longdon's question earlier, one of the questions that I've posed to Tim is what would we have to do by way of investment in the Civic Hall in order to make it more appealing to agents, travelling shows, etc., particularly West End shows. And one of the things that has been coming across is that there is potentially a need to increase seating capacity to about 1,000 seats, which seems to be a magic number in theatre circles. And the other would be to look at introducing a fly tower or something like that to appeal to particularly West End shows, because that's the sort of operating environment in which they need to operate. And allied to that, I think Tim has suggested some changes around the staging area to make the stage slightly higher and possibly deeper. That all costs money. You are talking capital, not revenue, but it would cost money. And one of the purposes of looking at the arts development strategy, and you'll see on page 45, there's a reference there to, sorry, not 45, it was 36, I think we were looking at before. You'll see a reference there to taking advantage, as it says there, the arts development strategy to be produced to reflect the range of current and potential future arts activities within the borough. This will be within the context of the borough plan, community plan, and borough council's corporate plan. And part of that will be to look, and you haven't seen it yet, but I think it's coming to your next meeting. We've done something similar with the leisure development strategy, which we've developed with the view of then looking at what the need and demand will be for facilities going forward as a result of building 14,000 houses in the borough, because clearly that's going to put pressure on services. The Civic Hall, and in this context the Museum and Art Gallery, are no different. And in that context there are opportunities to take advantage of the development potential from the borough plan to actually draw down monies, capital monies, from developers in order to enhance those facilities to meet the need generated by new residents coming into the borough. In order to facilitate that, you need a strategy behind that. The borough plan has a policy within it which says that we will do this, and for those of you who were at the examination in public on the local plan will have seen what Bulkington Village Centre did, for example, in terms of outlining how they would see the impact of development in Bulkington impacting upon their facilities and what they would need in order to grow to meet the demand. The Civic Hall is no different, neither is the Museum and Art Gallery, so what we're working towards is putting together a document that will, with some support from some specialists, that will demonstrate the need to look at how we invest in the facility in order to enhance the capacity and meet the needs of new residents coming in, but at the same time, and coincidentally, creating a better offer for the residents generally than now. As a facility, it's very good as a facility for what it does. I think you'd argue on cost. One of the issues that we have is that because of the size, it's sort of that medium-y size facility. So its ability to generate true income is inhibited. With investment, we can overcome that. Now, I'm slightly getting ahead of the game there in terms of that, because we need to do the work, to do the analysis, and we haven't yet done that. We're just at the inception stage at this stage. But we anticipate that it will generate the kind of numbers that would actually eat into that. And I'm using the 450, but the 672, it doesn't matter, that would eat into that and actually make the facility more cost effective to run. And I doubt that you'd ever get with the theatre, and I speak with some sort of background in theatre, you very unlikely to get a theatre that fully washes its face. Even the Belgrade doesn't wash its face. The Belgrade gets a massive financial hit from the West Midlands in order to, because of its arts development work. So theatre is never, a bit like swimming pools, they will never wash their face. What you can do is mitigate the cost, and that's certainly what you're alluding to. The question I posed to Tim was, other than the front of house improvements that were done some years ago, what major investment has occurred at the City Hall since 1974? And I think we struggled to identify significant investment. So it's an asset that's probably long overdue for some significant investment. Now, it's not something that we can afford to do ourselves, but it is something that, with developer funding, we might be able to facilitate. We may have to put some money in the pot, possibly, we don't know. But it is something that we really want to explore. As you'll know, Kevin's doing the same with leisure centres. We are looking seriously at how we can take full advantage of the borough plan, because this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. So we don't want that to go by. We want to get in there and make sure that we give ourselves the best chance for doing that. So it doesn't entirely answer your specific question, because I think you're thinking maybe what we can do in terms of marketing and promotion, and going to ask Tim to respond to that. But this is actually looking at a macro level and saying, strategically, what needs to happen to make this facility more sustainable? And that's the question that art strategy is we're looking to answer. Tim?
You want to add anything?
Yes, Catherine's just, while I've just been looking at this, Catherine's just found some quite interesting statistics, if we could share those with you.
Yeah, the newspaper report about the Belgrade states that they get £567,000 a year, and that's in addition to the money they get from the Arts Council. I think it's just useful to see what other theatres' subsidies are getting when you're looking at the Civic Hall.
That's coming from a much larger authority than Nuneaton and Bedworth, which has a much smaller income stream.
It is. I'm just saying.
I
I suppose the point I'm making is that if the borough wants to have a theatre, then there are costs associated with that. Warwick Arts Centre also receives a grant from Coventry City Council as well. So I think I'm just trying to back up Phil's posture or position, which is that a theatre doesn't necessarily wash its own face.
Yes,
And it's up for the local authority to sort of make a decision about the level of washing.
I think
its
that's
own
where I
face.
come from.
Yeah.
Residents that have come to me and said very clearly, there is, whether you take it as 400 and whatever, nearly £500,000, or whether you take it nearly 700,000, that cost effectively is almost what we had to do to charge for the green bins, for example. And I think that's what residents want me to have a look at and say is actually, are we looking at all of our discretionary services that are discretionary? Because we're told that a green bin is discretionary, everything's up for grabs. Are we actually making the most effective use of income streams, outgoings? Are we actually trying to trim fat where we need to? Are we trying to boost sales where we can? Because I think they want to know that everything this authority is doing is, yes, in their name, but also is done effectively. And I think they look at those decisions that we've had to make in recent years, and they want to be sure that all services are having to make those same difficult decisions.
Totally agree, Councillor.
And we would completely endorse that, Chair. I mean, it's absolutely right that you challenge, it's absolutely right that you question, and particularly on costs, because there are tough decisions that have to be made. So, absolutely right, we don't have a difficulty with that. But what I'm trying to do is set a different context, to say there is a different approach. And what we're mindful of, and if you remember Catherine's report, sometimes having these cultural facilities is going to play a very important part in terms of increasing footfall and increase wealth generation. So sometimes it's not a direct benefit that you can readily or tangibly calculate, but we know from some of the work that's been done that if we can increase footfall, it has positive benefits to the economy of the borough generally, and so it's not a straight like-for-like comparison that you can make. There are other factors you might want to consider in that round, and certainly because we've been working with Chris Laws in economic development, and certainly tourism, for example, is an area that we barely touch in terms of an authority, and yet if you were to compare ourselves with, say, Stratford, where they've got obviously they've got an international and an internationally recognised draw. There's nothing to say that we couldn't do something. I wouldn't say the same, because obviously it's not Shakespeare, but George Eliot is an international star on the literary stage. Not in the same, not as high on the league as William Shakespeare, but it is something that we feel we don't do enough with. If we got that right, if we can get the draw right, we have got a superb facility there that if we can get the right stuff in there, we can widen the appeal to a much broader base in the locality.
Councillor Hancock?
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Philip stole some of my thunder, actually. But,
Sorry.
But no, that's fine. It's all done there. But we spoke earlier about putting positive messages out. And the Civic Hall, along with some other things that we've done over the years, I suppose I should say, because they've been watching me from somewhere, is it the Civic Hall came about through the old Bedworth Urban District Council originally. But this authority, particularly since, 74 and that, been pioneers in various things, Civic Hall being one, leisure facilities being another, with a passport to leisure scheme, things like that. And you know, they were done for a reason, to enable our communities to feel more part of things. And you know, when the Civic Hall was built, I believe there was funding came from government at the time, but I believe there was also partly funded by public subscription. People in the town collected money for them, and it's important to have a varied range of arts provided. Arts isn't just about museums and paintings and that. It's about what we put on the stage or even community work. And Philip was right. That building now, thereabouts, is 45 years old, thereabouts, and it hasn't had a lot done to it really. And I was going to ask about the Arts Centre next door, but that doesn't come under Tim's remit. Although that needs a few quid spending on it, particularly for access for people with disabilities. But when you look at the Civic Hall and the competition that you've got around it, there's similar things that's going on. The Belgrade years ago was predominantly a proper theatre background. Now it's in the same sort of thing with tribute acts and that. So you've got Coventry, you've got us, Leamington does a similar range of stuff, and so that competition's all there. But the Civic Hall has got lots of benefits to it, one being the fantastic acoustics of the hall, recognised internationally. We had international opera star that used the Civic Hall. At the time it was top secret, it weren't allowed to be known, but that was before they built the Birmingham Philharmonic or
Symphony.
Symphony and that. But let's not forget, Chair, that whilst we have all these shows, and I understand how things change and we need to increase the private side of things, let's not forget it is a community building, and sometimes I think the title civic takes that away from it, but it's a community building. It was designed to be flexible, and you know, to allow community groups to use it. And you know, I went this afternoon to the performance of the Rainbow Sunshine Group, and if people don't know about that, it's a group of people with learning needs, and it's absolutely fantastic. Always make a point of going to it. But they normally do that in the Arts Centre, and yes, they got some funding from the Health Lottery to be able to put it into the main auditorium. And I was I was genuinely pleased to see how many people were there. I wasn't expecting so many people to be there. So, by the fact that it's moved from next door in the Arts Centre into the main auditorium, I think has attracted even more. There's no way you would have got the amount of people there today in the Arts Centre. So again, it's another gem in the borough, but we do need to look at how it's cost effective, and also how we can attract other things. I travel over to De Montfort Hall. I'm not sure what the quantity of seating is compared to the Civic Hall, but if you want to go and see some bands like the likes of that, you've probably got to go to the De Montfort, and I actually think there's a good future for the Civic Hall if we can send out a positive message about it. Thank you, Chair.
Tim did actually answer the question for Councillor Walmsley, Chair. I don't know whether he wants to do it now before you move on to the ones again.
Do you want to go before Councillor Longdon?
No, you.
Is that okay? Sorry, goodness. I totally agree, and we are aware that we are a discretionary service councillor. And what I would say is that the programming, the efforts that do go into marketing, the sourcing of new business is something that has been on the agenda now for at least the last 3 years. And the other thing that perhaps isn't as clear as seen in the report, there is something in the main auditorium on average every third day across the 365-day calendar year. There are approximately 120 to 125 main hall events. Now, some of those may be rehearsals, some may be conferences. We've got the Diabetes UK conference. We work very closely with Domestic in General, who do all their local training at the Civic Hall. We've also run other workshops and conferences with the NHS. So even though they're not down as shows, because that goes down as private hire, so that goes down as a hire facility. As a result of that, then that's led to Warwickshire County Council now coming back and taking the meeting rooms for another 6 months. So we are driving all of those facilities forward. And again, a lot of that has been due to the fact that there has been cash investment into the meeting rooms now with integrated sound systems, ceiling mounted projectors, and we've also tidied the rooms up, relaced the carpets, redecorated, so it now becomes a space that people want to hire. In terms of the point that Councillor Hancock's has made in terms of the acoustics, every artist that comes to the Civic Hall, whether they be amateur or professional, or international artists such as Jimmy Carr, Al Murray, Alistair McGowan, they all say that the acoustics are perfect, and that comes from Pavarotti himself, so you can't say any fairer than that. The majority of the investment in the 11 years that I've been at the Civic Hall has actually been in manpower and training, and also on the equipment in the main auditorium, because it's the main auditorium that earns us the most money. It's the main auditorium that pulls people to Bedworth, much the same as the museum. A lot of people, especially for the nationally known artists, Al Murray, Jimmy Carr, they will travel outside of our normal demographic profile. If I could just draw everyone's attention to page 61, what we have here is our patron postcode analysis, which is based on our mailing list. And not surprisingly, CVs 10, 11 and 12 are very, very high. But you'll also see that LE9 and LE10, just across the A5 corridor, they're also picking up. And then we're moving into Coventry with CV6, CV2. All of those opportunities now are the opportunity for us to develop those markets further. We're concentrating most of our effort on social media, e-shops, and we feel that the virtual reality investment will also pay off in the long term. Also, in relation to the pantomime, which was mentioned earlier, in relation to the pantomime this year, we had a total of 27 schools, 5 of which were from Nuneaton, 5 from Bedworth, 5 from Hinckley, 5 from Coventry, and other schools from the outlying districts. And we've even got schools travelling now as far as Tamworth and Ashby de la Zouch because of the quality of the pantomime. And the pantomime did exceed income expectations by over £20,000 this year. And so again, we are targeting the areas, in particular, we're talking about education, we're talking about entertainment, the pantomime is one of the first opportunities that young children and young people actually get to satisfy their need and their demand for live entertainment. And I think if the Borough Council continue to support the work of the Civic Hall, and to a certain degree the complementary things that we do with the museum as well, we are bringing extra footfall into the area that is not just the residents of Nuneaton and Bedworth. And they're coming because the council has the faith in the programming to bring nationally and internationally recognised artists to our Civic Hall.
Can I just...
Okay, then, I've
Sorry, Chair,
got
just to-
three other speakers. Go on, Bill.
Just to answer the other question, to completely answer for Councillor Walmsley, I hope he's appreciating all this attention that he's getting. The other thing, and Tim will give the detail on this, in terms of the facility itself, there are still some works that need to be done to the small hall to make that more attractive. As you know, it's had some technical whiz stuff put into it, but it still refurb to improve the aesthetics. And I say that knowing that I know somebody who would have gone there but didn't, because they said, oh, it's not really what we wanted. And similarly, with the closure of the bistro, we have the area, and it's on page 46, you'll see it's one of the outstanding actions that needs to be picked up. There is the opportunity to look at what we do with the area that was occupied by the kitchen area, and we're looking at how we can use that space effectively to possibly increase these conference facilities, changing facilities, etc., so that it makes the Civic Hall more attractive to certain groups and users. At the moment, we still haven't yet fully finalised what we'd like to do, but I think it's something that when we do, that will also add to the appeal of the building and actually then make the facility even more well used than it currently is.
I've got two speakers who haven't spoken already. Councillor Pomfret.
Well, most of what I was going to say has been said by somebody else, but I'll just say a few words. One is we need to remember we're attracting all these people in really so that a service which is basically for local people becomes more affordable than or more possible, exists, but is there for our local residents here in the borough. I mean, let's not forget, even to get to Coventry, you probably need a car. Okay, most people have got a car, lots of people don't though. Belgrade prices, well, I see Tim's listed the ticket prices in his report, but even the Belgrade is quite a lot more expensive than the Civic Hall on average. And other than that, well, if you want to go to Birmingham, which has lots and lots of very expensive and subsidised venues such as the Hippodrome and the Birmingham Rep, well, 2 tickets, you might get change out of 70 quid, £100, I don't know. Far more expensive than a facility which is for local people who mostly of modest means, certainly don't have the means to have a visit to Birmingham or Coventry on a regular basis. It is there on their doorstep. I know people are concerned about how much money it's costing the council taxpayers, but in 2 terms as a councillor, I think I have had 5 people, perhaps 6, raise the Civic Hall as an issue and not necessarily as a negative one. Thank you, Chair.
Okay. I've got 2 further speakers. Councillor Elliott.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, there's a saying that goes that the price of everything but the value of nothing, and that just springs to mind. If you look at page 10, the shows on there, children learning to play instruments. There's constant things in the news about mental health, decline in mental health and the value of arts, and we have to support the opportunity for children to learn to play instruments. There's not a lot of point learning to play an instrument if you can't perform for your family and your friends. And if you look at page 10, you've got the Warwickshire County Music Service there, all sorts of local dance schools and performing arts groups, amateur groups. You've got to give the arts an outlet to perform, and that's what the Civic Hall does. and the relaxed pantomime, the value of that, and you can't put a price on what that brings to the mental health of those groups that attend that, the dementia groups, etc. So that's what I wanted to say.
Councillor Longdon?
Thank you. I shook my hand up again as soon as I heard this word subsidy, which I think the officers have tried to cover politely, but I'm not going to be so polite, because it's not a subsidy. It's a budget, and it's agreed by Cabinet and by Council. So please call it a budget, not a subsidy, because you're deliberately giving the wrong impression on subsidies. We're not just handing the Civic Hall money, they have got to develop things, and they've got to put things on. So it's not a subsidy at all, so get your facts right for a start. And every time you do it, I'll pull you up for it, because it's not a subsidy, it's a budget, and it's been agreed by Council and Cabinet, and you agreed it as well. So don't come that one, because you're just trying to give the wrong impression to people all the time. As far as residents go, I'd love to know who these residents are that keep being reported about these detailed facts, allegedly. 27 years, never ever once been challenged on the Civic Hall. Been challenged a few times on the Abbey Theatre, never once on the Civic Hall, 27 years. So I don't know who these people are, but they never speak to me. But all of a sudden, since last year, there seems to be thousands of people talking to only Tory councillors, because they don't talk to Labour council. As has been reported, if we want to do something with the Civic Hall, it's going to have a massive, massive increase and capital expenditure to do something. I've been backstage when there's been a show, it's been mayhem. Been curtains up for people to get changed behind and all sorts of things. A lot of work needs to be done. A lot of work also needs to be done at the budget meeting. It was mentioned about closing for 2 days. Well, that would be really intelligent. I don't know what the officers think. Well, I'll ask you the question. What was happening if you closed for 2 days? Because if you want to start trying to make it bring in more income, you don't close it for 2 days. That's nonsense to do that. Absolute rubbish. And also conferencing facilities was mentioned somewhere along the line. If you're going to do that, you're going to have to go into the market of hotels and specific and purpose-built conference centres. And that's not what the Civic Hall was about. Never was about that. And so you're going to have to try and make it that. And then you're going to have to market it as such. Never will happen, because you're in that wrong sort of market for all of that. So I don't know how you feel about answering those questions, but it makes me angry. It really makes me angry when we get this misrepresentation time after time after time. And every time you do it, I'm going to be there to pull you up.
Thank you very much for the accuracy in that, Chair.
No, you don't.
The current budget that they're working to this financial year was actually agreed before I was a councillor, so I couldn't have agreed it. In addition, the budget for next year provided the Civic Hall was not agreed by me. I voted against the budget that went through on the night, so I'd just like to put that on record as factual accuracies.
I've got no intention of asking the officers of whatever political whom that to answer the questions whether the Civic Hall would be better closed for 2 days a week and joined up with the museum and various other things that have been suggested. We've no intention to do that to the officers. Councillor Tandy.
Thanks, Chair. Recently there has been a lot of discussion and speculation about things that are happening in Nuneaton, about what people want, and a lot of the responses that we've had that have been on social media or in the local papers has been about evening entertainment that is needed, possibly wherever they want, you know, whatever the plans provide. Why do we not want to perhaps not want to continue providing the funding for that evening entertainment to occur in Bedworth, just as much as people seem to want it in Nuneaton? I don't know how many people in this room have actually visited the Civic Hall and been to any functions in the Civic Hall. I've been to many, many, many. I go to the pantomime and pay for it every single year. And I was at a show a matter of a few weeks ago, the ABBA show. It was full to overflowing. I don't think there were many empty seats in the house at all. So I think we need to concentrate on providing the entertainment. I'm hopeful we will be able to do so under the transforming Nuneaton plans in Nuneaton as well. And I think the majority of people in Nuneaton would love to have a civic hall here as well as the one in Bedworth.
Councillor?
I'd like to echo June and Bill in saying that, you know, we've got a little diamond in this area with the Civic Hall, and when there is a show on and people are spilling out into the streets afterwards, it's great to see, and you know, as a sort of Bedworth comes alive, you know. And this might sound really simplistic, and I understand that quite a lot of money is needed to improve the area. In the Civic Hall, one of the things that I've heard about is the stage in particular. We talked earlier about how could we attract, you know, sort of bigger shows and stuff. And I think it's to do with there's no wings, is there, at the side and stuff like that. Now, could we start to improve things with this with small first, you know, like if we improve the stage, somehow got together and got funding for that, would that help sort of bring in other shows that otherwise couldn't use Bedworth Civic Hall?
Yeah,
you know?
yeah, through the chair. The Civic Hall does have its limitations, as does any particular space. In terms of our occupancy, the majority of London-based agents who are the prime drivers with entertainment, they have this magical figure of 1,000 seats. They always say, how many seats have you got? 745. Oh, well, that's no good then. I said, well, isn't it better to go for a 745-seater auditorium and sell it out as Jimmy Carr? I mean, Jimmy Carr's already sold out. Jasper Carrot, later in the year, we know that will sell out. They're even looking at the possibility of extending the tour to maybe 3 days. The issue that we have is that you have a space, you have a building that at the time, as Councillor Hancock has alluded to, in 1974 it was a pioneering venture for the local authority and also for the government at the time. And it was seen as a flagship for the local authorities, and it was seen as a flagship for entertainment for the future, in terms of being a fully flexible space where we could take all the seating out, we could have flat floor exhibitions, etc. Now, part of the proviso for the Civic Hall was that it should become community orientated. It should give local community and arts organisations the opportunity to perform in a professional space at an affordable price. Now, of course, as prices have gone up and costs of salaries and costs of investment have gone up, we have invested very heavily in sound and light, and I think for those of you that have been to see shows, especially the pantomime in particular, that is our showcase. The majority of artists that come to us, Talon in particular, they perform all over the country and all over Europe. They love the Civic Hall, they see it as their hometown venue. What we also do need to take into consideration is that when Symphony Hall was being built, it was very much a concept stage in terms of orchestral performance. In hindsight, it would have been nice if the stage was a minimum of 1 metre high, because a lot of the dance schools that use it, we have the annual Festival of Arts dance competition, a lot of the adjudicators have to have the space in front of their adjudication box completely clear because they need to see the dancers' feet, which is an integral part of the performance. So we've got fantastic acoustics, we've got fantastic potential, we have got growth potential, as Councillor Walmsley has already alluded to, and we are doing everything that we possibly can to extend that. But what I would say is that there are, given the opportunity for massive investment, because that's what it would cost, then yes, you could improve the venue, but your performance space itself is the heart and soul of the venue. Aesthetically wise, front of house, it's had various facelifts over the years. I mean, I've been there 11 years and I don't think we've spent a terrific amount of money on the front of house apart from the box office improvement, when we moved the box office from the front to the back of the building. So I'm heartened by a number of the comments that have been tabled this evening, and I do take into account councillors' comments about us need to be financially aware of our investment and the amount of contribution that the Civic Hall gets. And the people that work there, and much the same with Catherine and her team at the museum, we are all passionate about the arts, as I think quite a number of people are around this table. And we will deliver you the best possible product that we can within the resources that we've got.
Mrs. Ross?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. Apart from being very horrified at the thought of all the expense, we haven't highlighted the fact that coming through the post, just during this week, I've had brochures like this from Warwick Arts Theatre, and it's almost a carbon copy of that. I've also got another brochure from Kilworth, which again, a carbon copy of this. So much as I would love to have a theatre in Nuneaton and be able to have the facilities that we have in Bedworth, I think that it is just a pipe dream, really. I don't think we can afford it. But I do hope that the authority will continue to support Bedworth, because I think we are privileged to have it on our doorstep.
Councillor Sargent?
You mentioned, I've got the word now. So Warwickshire coming in to do some
Adult training.
yeah, and then you've got, I've lost the word.
Shop mobility?
No, conferences.
Yes.
Does that pay, or does that, you know, is there, you know, what's the cost of putting that on if there's no show to open it up, to let them people in? Is it you know, on balance, is there a profit in it, or is it a...
Yeah, working with the accountants, we have a basic programme of a duty manager and a door supervisor who looks after the health and safety of the building. A minimum of 4 door staff, because we have 4 fire exits which have to be manned. And then, dependent on the number of tickets sold, either 2 or 3 staff behind the bar. Obviously the box office is there to process payments. But every show is different. Today, for example, we had 6 members of staff on duty.
As in conferences? So
In terms of conferences, it depends on whether the conferences are upstairs. If they're upstairs in the meeting rooms, then we only need 1 member of staff, and that's to assist with evacuation from the building. If it's a conference in the main hall, then as I said, we have 4 fire exits and we have to man those 4 fire exits. So the staffing costs are always priced up for the maximum number of staff that we may need in the main auditorium.
So does it make money from the centre?
Yes, it does. Yeah.
Okay, so if domestic and general hire it, the costs, or the profit outweighs the costs?
Yeah, just with domestic in general now. With the fact that we've lost the bistro facility, we always used to do their lunches as well. Now, unfortunately, they tend to have their training sessions and conferences on the Monday and Wednesday when the coffee bar is closed. But the coffee bar now, with the limited menu, we cannot possibly cater for up to 120 delegates for tea in the morning, a lunchtime break, and then tea in the afternoon as well. So we always insist on each delegate has to buy our teas and coffees, and we do that at a fully inclusive rate. My daughter works at Jury's Inn and they charge £8 per delegate per day. We charge £1.50. But of course their overheads are considerably higher. The other thing as well, we actually have an in-house technical team that can cope with virtually every eventuality in a meeting room, because we do it on a regular basis in the main auditorium. Our other competitors tend to hire out the space and then bring in an AV company to do all the audio-visual stuff. They'll bring in a catering company to do the catering stuff, and any other particular services that require, they'll provide that as well. So it's all an additional cost.
So it's a good thing to exploit then, the conferences?
Yeah, the only thing that we do struggle with is accommodation, because the nearest, if you like, large-scale hotel complexes are either the Holiday Inn Express, the Griff House, the Travel Lodges, or Western Hall. And what a lot of large conference scale organisers like to do is have a drink after they've had their conference. Now, if they've then got to drive back to their hotels, we're on a disadvantage there right from the start. But we do work very closely with Western Hall, and we get references from Western Hall that are too big for them, and the ones that are too small for us, then we refer those to Weston Hall. So there is that working partnership within the borough to maintain that spend within Nuneaton and Bedworth, and that's the important thing, I think.
Okay, thanks. So, thanks for your report, Tim. I've always thought that Civic Hall was the jewel in the borough's crown. I think it always has been, and it would be a shame if we were to downgrade it or whatever people tend to do would be an absolute shame, because I've been to a couple of shows myself, and in fact you mentioned Pavarotti. I remember saying to David Matthews, who was the manager at the time, I said I would have sacked him. I would have sat anywhere in the Civic Hall and listened to Pavarotti. And he said, well, John, he says, we never knew. The band, the orchestra come in, played a set, then a great big row of tables come in for the lunchtime, and Pavarotti turned up, went through the set, and that was it, gone. Just as simple as that. He used the Civic Hall because of the acoustics. And as we see, the Birmingham Symphony Orchestra recorded a few albums there as well, because of the, and who can ever forget on a Saturday afternoon, live from Bedworth Civic Hall, the wrestling. So we had, so that was Bedworth Civic Hall, you know, and as we said, we got a wee bit of the wrestling this year, but the mayor being involved in all that sort of thing, and so of course we've got the darts, and that looks like an ongoing thing. So I'm very proud of what we actually do for the Civic Hall, and more power to your elbow. Thanks, Tim, for your report. Right, item number 9. That means you can leave it, doesn't it? We've got to tie yourself now.
Thank you very much indeed, panel, for your comments and observations as well. Thank you.
Philip.
Well, Chair, what I was going to do today was the exact opposite of what I did last time. So, what I was just going to draw attention to in the report itself, which is on page, well, it starts on page 74, is just the reference to the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act. As you'll see, there have been no covert surveillance undertaken under that act by any department in the Borough Council. I make that point because it is a requirement that you have oversight of that, and there's nothing to report. Other than that, Chair, there is in Appendix A, the report itself. You have got a whole host of facts and figures and charts. I don't propose to go through every single one, because I think last time it took about an hour to get through it. So what I propose to do, Chair, is just assume that members have read it, hope you've read it, and just endeavour to deal with any issues or questions that arise as best I can. I've had some notes from colleagues, but I may not be able to answer everything. So, but I will see what I can do. So I was going to throw it open to you, Chair, to ask members if they've got any issues or questions they wish to raise.
And for that, any members got any questions or issues to raise in the report? Fantastic. Councillor Wongley.
Thank you, Chair. Couple of things I just wanted to go through, particularly focusing on, as you'd imagine, the sad faces, as the report now shows them in the black and whites. One of the biggest things and concerns for me is on 81, page 81, particularly to do with the refuse costs, at the very top of that, the increased fuel, salary, agency costs, etc., that are up on where they were as a general rule, and perhaps also links to an extent on the top of the top of 82, the refuse cost increase as well there. What are we doing to try and perhaps look at that? How are we best managing those costs to try and stop the overspends in that particular departments?
I think the easier part of that question to answer is on page 82. Insofar as I am aware that if I say the bottom's fallen out of the market of recycling, that would be a slight understatement, really. It is quite dire in terms of what's happening nationally and internationally in the context of recycling, which has created quite significant cost pressures, not just here, but across the whole country. I think all local authorities are feeling the pinch when it comes to recycling costs. We've been hit principally because we had, I suppose, a golden ticket in terms of recycling costs. With our previous contractual arrangements that we extended, we were holding over on some extremely favourable recycling rates. And unfortunately, as is always the case, we've come to the end of that. We've had to go back to the market just at the time when the Chinese have done what they've done in terms of refusing to take recyclables now, and that had quite a significant impact on recycling generally. So in terms of those costs, largely those costs are principally due to the increased recycling costs from the new contract. In terms of the page 81, I suppose it breaks down in simplistic terms to this, that obviously, particularly refuse collection, it's the universal service. It's the one thing you have to get right as a district council. We are the statutory collection authority for waste, and we can't not run the service. It would cause mayhem. It does then put significant pressure on teams in terms of sickness absence. So if any, they tend to, I think the crews, they're either crews of 3 or 4, I'm not entirely sure, but for health and safety reasons we have to have a fully manned crew, which means if we have anybody phoning in sick, we have to have backup arrangements. My understanding is that that's tended to be agency workers up until now, so, and that's one of the reasons why agency costs have been quite high, because you have to run the service and you need people who know what they're doing. It's not a case of just pulling somebody off the street and saying, put this overall and off you go. There are health and safety considerations, particularly training and being aware of how to operate the equipment, etc. So it's a high risk activity, as I'm sure you can imagine, with all the hydraulics and stuff. So you need to have a fairly good team of backup arrangements. As I understand it, what we have been looking at, and it's robbing Peter to pay Paul to a certain extent, is to look particularly at the driver's side and to look at having multi-skilled drivers and refuse collectors who may well be working on the street cleansing teams, and that we'd prioritise refuse collection over street cleansing if we had to, so that we can mitigate the cost of having to purchase an agency worker in. And it's simply because, as I'm sure you appreciate, with staff who are on sick, they still get their sick pay. If you're going to bring somebody in, it means that you're going to have to pay the equivalent again over in order to run the service. By using refuse street collection team drivers or operatives does mitigate that to some extent. It does mean that there's a diminution in service, and it's a balance that we have to try and strike. But that's what I think we're looking at in terms of how we strike that balance. Whether there's any alternative, I don't know, but that's certainly my understanding of what Glenn and Randall's been looking at in terms of trying to reduce the agency cost. Because agency spend is something that we look at, and we do worry about agency spend. I know some members may have seen some figures on agency spend. This is probably the one area where it genuinely is extra spend. I say that because I know that some services use agency people, but they do it using salary budgets. In other words, we're covering there may be a salary vacancy and we've got an agency worker in, so that the cost of the agency is covered by existing salary budgets. Here, it's not necessarily the case, and that's why we're looking at how we can pull in additional resources from within existing teams. I don't know whether that completely answers your question, but that's as best as I can do.
Yeah, I think the problem is, and it, you know, comes back to cost. £300,000 overspent compared to the budget forecast versus the forecast outturn is 60% of the green bin cost. You know, so if there are things we can do like that in house to try and lower those costs, that will potentially leave us as an authority in a much better financial position.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, and part of that, just looking at that, I mean, obviously you've got salary costs, so presumably we've had some changes in salary arrangements, and fuel costs will be a quite significant part of that as well, I guess. And you know, if fuel goes up by say 10%, that could be quite a significant cost to the service.
That's speculation, I appreciate.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else? No? Thanks a lot for that. Item number 10 is the forward plan, for information only, and the last item, final meeting of the plan will be the 25th of April, and I've no notice of any other business. I haven't any other business. I'd like to thank everybody for their attendance and safe journey home.